I like performance SUVs because they deliver maybe not quite the absolute best of both worlds, but something pretty close. To put it in the simplest of terms, if you like a little spirited driving but need something practical too, then look no further. And in particular, it's the less hardcore versions that appeal to me the most, since they don't lean too far in either direction. Yes, that means the BMW X3 M40i and the Audi SQ5, but don't be too quick to dismiss the Acura RDX A-Spec either. In fact, I think it's about this close to being the ideal option for people who are looking for a little driving enjoyment in an SUV this size, but then it all comes apart in a way I just couldn't live with. For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. Okay, so before we get to my issues with the RDX, we are going to go over some of the stuff I like and some of the important details, including in the fact that in the US, I know there's a whole bunch of trims that you can get, including more luxurious ones, whereas in Canada, there are only two to pick from, and they are both A-Spec trims, which are the sort of sporty takes on the RDX. It's Acura's kind of sporty trim that isn't quite as sporty as the Type S, but it's pretty good. That's also not to say that this isn't luxurious. This has all kinds of good features. The build quality is also really nice. There's active noise canceling, and just generally, this is a very quiet, upscale feeling cabin. I do like that a lot, but obviously it does err to the sporty end of the spectrum, especially with this red upholstery that I absolutely love. And this is standard in both trims. Now you can only get it with white, gray, and black paint, which bums me out a little bit. The palette isn't crazy. There's only a couple other colors that you can get. There's a blue and a red. I really wish you could get this red interior with that blue paint. I think it would be an awesome combination, but Acura has decided not to put them together. I don't know why. Maybe that's a question for Acura Canada, because I do think it would look really good, but against this gray, I just think it is a perfect combination, so I'm not going to complain too much. Now, regardless of the exterior color, I think Acura's design language works really well with the proportions of this smaller RDX, and it's not that they don't look good on the MDX, but they just work really well. The fenders bulge out just enough, and I love the grille, that really kind of dynamic styling. It is super cool. And then speaking of the proportions, this thing is slightly smaller than a rival like the BMW X3 or the Mercedes-Benz GLC class, but there's still a ton of room inside. Now, I can sit behind myself fairly comfortably, which is an impressive accomplishment for a small-ish SUV. And then the cargo space, it's actually pretty generous. And there's even handles back there if you want to stow the second row, which I love because it means you don't have to walk to either door to drop that 60/40 split folding bench in the back. It really makes this thing that much more user-friendly and usable, and so does the power tailgate that's height programmable, which is great if you park in underground parking. There's also a kick sensor, so if you got your hands full, you just walk up, wave your foot underneath the bumper, and it will open as long as you have the fob in your pocket. And again, that is standard on both trims, which is rare. I don't care if you're talking about the mainstream market or the premium market. It's not often that you see features like that across the lineup, even a small lineup like this one. So I like that Acura did that. And the same goes with a lot of the features here, not just this leather that is leather and suede upholstery. That's standard on both trims. Heated and ventilated front seats, those are standard, and they have one of my favorite features that is so underutilized in the auto industry in general, an automatic setting for the seats. So you hit this button here, and then if it's cool, well, the heated seat will come on one of the 3 stages. And likewise, if it's a hot day like today, you just hit it, and right now it's on full ventilation. Give it a couple minutes and it's gonna drop down a level or 2. I really like that because you don't have to think about it. Now, the RDX has been kept really simple when it comes to the mechanical stuff too. So everyone in Canada has the exact same drivetrain. You've got a 10-speed automatic transmission and a fully automatic all-wheel drive system. That means you can't turn it on or off. Not that I'm sure you would want to anyways. It automatically shuffles torque around, and it also has a torque vectoring system. So that means it'll actually run the outside rear wheel a little bit faster through corners to give you a little bit more turn-in response. It's very imperceptible, but it does work. I mean, this thing does handle pretty nicely. And then as far as the engine goes, it's a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine that makes 272 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque. And I don't care how much sportiness you are looking for, that is more than enough, especially when you spin this dial over into sport mode. I don't care if that's artificial sound. It sounds really good. Now, this does bring us back to what I said off the top about the BMW X3 M40i as well as the SQ5 from Audi. And it's important to note that both of those make more output. Both horsepower and torque is quite a bit more, but they also use 6-cylinder engines. That means this 4-cylinder, well, the output is closer to kind of the more entry-level engines that you get in both of those things, but I don't think it matters at all. And this thing more than makes up for it. Also, I don't really care that much because these things aren't about outright speed. What's most impressive about this is the way it handles. I was actually surprised at just how agile this thing is, and even the steering feel, especially once you spin it into sport mode, it firms up just enough, and it really makes this thing a pleasure to pilot. Now, there is one important distinction between the A-Spec and this Premium Elite A-Spec, and that is the adaptive dampers that come with this top trim that I'm driving. You can't adjust them, but there are those drive settings, so you've got sport, normal, and comfort. I really do like comfort. Even in sport, it's not necessarily uncomfortable. It definitely errs on the sportier side rather than supple. It's a little stiff, but the bigger problem is that the suspension tends to get overwhelmed over kind of a series of bumps. So one bump in the road, you're not really going to notice it. It does a decent job of absorbing that, but it's the next one. So if you're on a city street with all kinds of potholes, a bunch of pressure cracks, you are going to notice that it does get overwhelmed, and it'll kind of jostle you around a little more than you would like in a premium SUV. But again, it's not too bad, and it's nicely balanced out with this quiet, kind of cozy cabin. Now, something that stood out to me more than the ride quality is this driver's seat, and not in a good way. Didn't take too long during my evaluation drive the other day for some upper leg pain to set in, and it surprised me considering the 16-way power adjustability, including this lower cushion that lifts in this top trim. I've got long legs, that's really key, but even still, some cramping kicked in after a couple hours, and the same thing has happened today, so that was a letdown. But what isn't, all the features that you get. I talked about the heated and ventilated seats. You've also got a built-in Wi-Fi hotspot, Sirius XM satellite radio. You've got wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, all kinds of good stuff. This power panoramic sunroof, that is standard. When you get into this Platinum Elite A-Spec trim, you also get some extras like a head-up display, surround view monitoring, and heated rear seats. Really well-rounded package. And considering this top trim, it's only $60,000 or so before freight and tax. That's very reasonable. So is the $54,000 for the A-Spec trim. I'm telling you, you're gonna pay at least $12,000 more for an SQ5 or an X3 M40i. And that's before you add any of the extras, especially the advanced driver assist features that do not come standard in those things. That gives this some serious appeal. Look, obviously Acura sells a ton of these things every year, which means there are plenty of people out there who will tell you that this touchpad is fine, but I am here to tell you they are wrong, and you can look at it in the context of working from home. Yeah, sure, you can sit at your dining room table, but it's just nowhere near as comfortable and convenient as a desk and a proper chair. The same principle applies here. Sure, you can use this touchpad, but it's just not as good as a touchscreen. That is what's missing here. And I'd even argue that this one is worse than the one that Lexus has been phasing out, or the console controller that Mazda uses. And here's why. Acura calls it True Touch. So where you touch on this trackpad, well, it corresponds on the screen. But that means on the fly, if you want to swipe over from, I don't know, the map down to Apple CarPlay, you have to hold your finger down, especially if you don't want to take your eyes off the road. Well, with the touchscreen, you can just tap the icon and go. Here, you can't do that. So sure, you can try to memorize it and tap the corner of the screen, but if you want to move down to, I don't know, Bluetooth or satellite radio, you have to swipe around and you have to hold your finger down to do it and then tap. It is very frustrating. Now, Apple CarPlay does work more like a conventional cursor, and that's cool, but this is a system that was designed around touch inputs, not some stupid fiddly little console controller, and I cannot wait for Acura to kick this to the curb. To recap, I like the total package the RDX delivers, especially for the price as well as the way it looks. I don't like the infotainment interface, the driver's seat that isn't as comfortable as it should be, or that the ride is a little stiff. Looking at the sum of its parts as a sort of performance light SUV, I think the Acura RDX is one of the best options on the market. It's got just about everything you could need in terms of driving enjoyment, plus it's roomy and comes with all kinds of good features for a very compelling price tag. But then when it comes to the infotainment interface, the entire package comes apart at the seams. Now, I'm not here to tell you it's an absolute deal breaker, but I will say this. Before you get your heart set on one, make sure you spend some quality time inside to see if you can live with it in the long haul.